Welcome to the Deep Dark. This is Minecraft's scariest new dungeon, and it doesn't work like anything we've seen in the game before. Here, the rules are different. To win, you must be sneaky and stealthy, and to outsmart the Warden, you'll need dozens of tricks up your sleeve. So today, we're going to find out some of the best strategies to conquer ancient cities, tactics to evade the Warden's wrath, and see why this is one of the best places in the game to live. So subscribe if you like what you see. We're very close to 400k. I will be your host, I'm Simply Sark, and how do you beat the Deep Dark? Before you begin tackling the Deep Dark, you've got to know your enemy inside out, and one of the most important pieces of information you'll need is the actual number of shriekers, sensors, and skulk you need to avoid or destroy. The good news is each ancient city generally has around about the same number. You can see there is quite a lot around, but don't you worry, I'll save you the trouble and count them for both of us. In the meantime, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Buff.game. Buff is a free gaming rewards program that lets you earn awesome stuff like gift cards, game keys, in-game skins, and much more. The best bit is all you have to do is play your favorite games. Buff supports tons of popular games like League of Legends, Fortnite, Valorant, Apex Legends, and now awesomely, Minecraft over on the Hypixel server. As mentioned, you don't have to do anything, Buff just runs quietly in the background as you play. It doesn't mine crypto, nor does it hog GPU or CPU resources whilst you game. Buff is also now a trusted partner of Overwolf and has over 5 million users and counting. Buff lets you stay focused on your games and helps you get even more out of them, which I think is really awesome. Definitely go check out Buff for free today. Use my link in the description this June and you'll get an extra 70 Buff points on top of the usual 30 to give you a head start. Thank you once again to Buff for sponsoring today's video. The results are in. Ancient cities generally have about 50 shriekers, 350 sensors, a whopping 35,000 skulk blocks, and 15,000 veins. And if you're curious, there's about 75 catalysts as well. This information is a really great way to keep track of how much progress you've made and to see how close you are to making the city totally safe. A question you might have though is, why do I need to come here? There's a lot of cool stuff in ancient cities, but something really awesome is that mobs actually can't spawn here. It's kind of like a mushroom island, so if you wanted to make a cave base, this is one of the best places to do it. If that's not convinced you, let's talk about XP. We know how many skulk blocks there are in ancient cities, but how much experience does that actually translate to? Let me show you. With 75 catalysts, this nets you pretty much a solid 30 levels. 350 sensors will also get you 30 levels. Shriekers are actually a bit lame though. All 50 only get you to level 13. 35,000 skulk blocks though. This is roughly how much there is per city, a solid 2x2x2 chunks worth. How much XP is in this monstrosity? Well, apparently each block drops 1 XP point, so with 35,000 of them, you could expect at least 108 levels from the entire place. With mending, that's about 89 levels, mending plus unbreaking, 104 levels. With all that, you could easily max enchant around 100 items. Now, if you're actually looking for an ancient city, you might be scratching your head for a while because they're not super duper common things to find, but there is actually a way to increase your likelihood of locating one. Kind of like how azalea trees hint towards there being a lush cave below, apparently ancient cities tend to spawn more often under mountainous regions. So if you're struggling to find one, try focusing on looking in areas with big hills and mountain ranges rather than flat biomes. One of the first things you're going to notice with the Deep Dark is it really is very dark. You basically can't see anything. Before you get here, definitely invest in some night vision potions, otherwise you're really going to struggle. Now eventually you're actually going to want to light this whole area up, so you're going to need quite a lot of light sources. I counted and I'd recommend at the very least 15 stacks of torches or whatever light block you're using. Ancient cities seem scary at first, but once you understand how everything works, it becomes a lot less intimidating. Take sensors and shriekers. They're actually only dangerous when you find them together. Shriekers only get set off in 2 scenarios. You step on them, or a sensor relays a vibration to them. Likewise, sensors are essentially harmless by themselves. They only become a concern if they have something to relay a message to. Use this knowledge to your advantage. It'll help you navigate the Deep Dark much more effectively. So wool blocks are an essential part of sneaking around the deep dark undetected, but you've got to be a little careful because there are some situations where they don't work properly. For example, watch out for the edges. If you jump or land on the edge of a wool block, this won't always include vibrations. It'll count as a regular block. So if you're jumping around doing parkour, make sure to try and land on the center of the wool, not the edges. Now, if you really want to start building a base down here, like I've shown you, there is a lot of cleaning up to do. There is a major skulk infestation in this city, and you might think this looks like a mammoth task, but getting rid of all this mess is actually way easier than it seems. The best tool to mine skulk is the hoe, and you'll be pleased to know you're able to insta-mine it. The great thing, however, is that because Skulk drops XP, if you have a mending hoe, this makes cleaning up Skulk completely free. Because ancient cities are such a great place to have a base, making the city safe should be your #1 priority. That's why before you start looting or trying to remove Skulk, you should focus on destroying the Shriekers. Once you've gotten rid of them all, there is basically nothing that can hurt you anymore. So what's the best strategy on taking out Shriekers? If you find a Shrieker by itself, you're allowed to just punch it. This won't trigger anything. If you find a single Shrieker surrounded by lots of sensors, take out the Shrieker first. If you find a single sensor surrounded by Shriekers, take out the sensor first. Do note, however, that there is a lot more sensors than Shriekers in cities. As I said, they outnumber them 7-1. So it's way less likely for this to happen, and there probably is a sensor hiding somewhere you just can't see. For example, sensors can generate inside Skulk patches. It's a really dirty move, but just be aware of it. On the other hand, if you find lots of Shriekers and sensors together, this is where you'll need to pay more attention. You'll need to use wool here. Again, the Shriekers are the priority, so you'll need to include every angle that breaking a Shrieker might trigger a sensor. Once it's safe, break the Shrieker. But what do you do when this happens? In this scenario, it's impossible to include every face. The good news is there is a technique to deal with this. It's just a little riskier. What you got to do is find the general center of the Shriekers and place a wool block. Hoe at the ready, break the wool block. What's going to happen is all of the sensors will be activated and distracted. In this brief moment, you're able to break a Shrieker undetected. The reason this works is because sensors only trigger Shriekers if it was deemed to be a player action. A wool block dropping from a tile doesn't count as a player action. Do not throw the item onto the Shriekers. This is considered a player action and it will set off the Shriekers. What you've got to remember about Wardens is they only spawn after you've set off 4 Shriekers. If you're a real wimp like me and really want to avoid fighting him at all costs, there is a cowardly tactic you can use. When you die, your Shrieker tally resets. So say you've set off 3 Shriekers and only have 1 chance left, you can actually intentionally die, and when you respawn, your tally is back to 0. This is great if you don't want to lose your stuff in a risky area, or if you'd like to take out Shriekers without faffing around with wool too much. But let's be real here, even if you try really hard not to summon the Warden, you're bound to slip up eventually. And if you really mess up, you're actually going to have to fight him. One of his most dangerous weapons is the darkness effect he inflicts on you. Unlike most status effects, milk actually isn't able to remove it, and this applies to honey as well. The aim is to confuse and disorient you, and it can really throw you off balance. That's why I'd recommend using spectral arrows over regular arrows if you're taking him on. These work through the darkness effect and are really going to help you stay oriented and see where the Warden is in relation to you. Alternatively, sometimes it can be a decent strategy to strike first to get the upper hand. If you'd rather avoid getting the darkness effect altogether, you can actually intentionally set off Shriekers from at least 40 blocks away, and this will spawn a Warden, but won't give you the effect. Beware though, if you let the Warden get too close, he'll give it to you. Beating the ancient cities is all about being sneaky and having tricks up your sleeve, and I have a really good one you can try. Night vision potions are essential, but I'd also strongly recommend having a couple of slow falling potions as well. A cool thing with slow falling is it actually prevents jumping from triggering sensors. You can fall from any height, and as long as there's no sideway movement when you're on the ground, you're totally safe. This gives you more control on how you can explore, but you can also go a step further. As you may know, if you combine an elytra with slow falling, this essentially lets you hover in mid-air. To avoid confusion, elytra use still gets picked up by sensors and wardens, but this technique is extremely powerful for maneuvering around the deep dark. It's so much easier to control elytra in this state and gives you time to plan where you'd like to go with a lot more precision. For example, lighting up the ceiling can be a real chore and normally requires loads of noisy block placing, but here you can lay down tons of torches super duper quickly. The same applies to clearing Skulk. What would normally be a really tedious task becomes a breeze when you combine Hose with Elytra and Slow Falling. This trick is also a decent way of evading the Warden, but be warned, you aren't invulnerable. Don't showboat and waft around an agitated Warden because his sonic attack can still easily get you. If you're going to use it, get as far away from the Warden as quickly as possible, because generally if you hear this sound, you are already dead. Everyone is looking for ways to cheese the Warden, but I'd just like to point out a few facts to save you a death or two. First, if you've set off a Shrieker, trying to break it to shut it up won't work. In fact, it'll actually just make the Warden spawn immediately. You may think the sonic attack works sort of like Guardian lasers, but it doesn't. It doesn't need a line of sight, and it can get you through blocks. The Warden looks pretty thick, but if you look at his bounding box, he actually only has a 1x1 block width, so don't assume he'll be too big to fit through narrow areas, because a lot of the time, he can. What you've got to remember about the Deep Dark and Ancient Cities is this is all about being sneaky and not getting caught. The Warden is exciting, but he's designed to be a punishment, not an opponent. That's why my advice is more tailored to tactics that avoid him even showing up, because to beat the Warden isn't to 1v1 him. It's to enter the cities, steal his stuff, and if you're skilled enough, outright block him from spawning. But these were just some of the strategies I think are useful in the Deep Dark. What kind of tactics are you planning on using to outsmart the Warden? I'd love to know. Either way, guys, that is all we have time for today. I really hope you enjoyed. This whole sneaky system is fun to think about. But as always, guys, I have been your one and only Simply Sark, and I will catch you in the next one.